All your pain, your rage. At some point, it's what you are. And pain despises hope, I know. But Mary's song isn't just hope. We can gather people like us and make sure your angels can't hurt anyone else.
But I don't care about anyone else. No, wait. You don't care about anyone else.
I care about Mary.
Oh, is she your new best friend? Is she your new best friend?
I don't know how to do this. This riddle me shit. It's beneath you.
Well, no, it isn't.
Mr. Burrows?
Mr. Scampoli?
You look very fine.
I think so, too.
Yes, welcome to the Never Afters podcast, the Nevers podcast. As you know, I am Mr. Scampoli. That's Mr. Burrows. We are here to discuss the Nevers episodes 2 and 3. Tell us who made these episodes, Mr. Burrows.
Well, episode 2, Exposure, was written by Jane Espenson and directed by Joss Whedon himself. Episode 3, Ignition, was written by Kevin Lau and directed by David Semel. And so we see quite the Buffy overlap here again for any Joss show, with Jane Espenson obviously closely tied and has written many great things, both with and without Joss Whedon. And David Semel is a director who's also been on Buffy and Angel and a bunch of other shows. The only sort of quote-unquote unknown would be the writer of episode 3, Kevin Lau, who... I won't say he's done nothing, but relatively speaking, he's not got the broadest resume of the bunch, though he is working on the new Game of Thrones prequel show. So that's quite interesting. This is who put them together, and we are talking about the episodes 2 and 3, so there will be spoilers for those episodes. If you're listening in the future, we're doing this as the episodes come out, so there will be no spoilers beyond this point because we don't know what happens, but we will talk about 2 and 3. And just as a brief sort of summary at the start, it seems to be almost the opposite of what critics have said, just from what I've seen, but I really liked episode 2 a lot, despite some sort of kitschy, tropey stuff that I think fits in actually quite well. And then episode 3, I didn't love as much. It felt like real middle of the season kind of stuff. It's not middle of the season, but middle of this batch of 6 episodes. That's the first half of the season. And I don't know, the pace just didn't feel as good as episodes 1 and 2. Of course, it had a fantastic set piece in it, so still, worth watching. But I wasn't as excited at the end of episode 3 as I was after 1 and 2. Do you want to summarize any thoughts on these episodes, Jim?
I kind of have the same thought. Jesus, excuse me. I kind of have the same thought that you have on episode 3 on both episodes in a lot of ways. I don't know what that is. I do think it is fitting that we're discussing them together because they seem to play better. And maybe I'm just biased because I watched them back to back. But it's weird because on one hand, there's a thing I've complained about all the time. I yell at strangers in the street is that TV shows these days stretch out their goddamn plots and they drag everything out. I'm looking at you, Netflix shows, where you take 3 or 4 episodes of story and you spread that out across a season. Whereas here, I feel like they've almost done a season of a show in 3 episodes. Which on one hand I do admire because they're not wasting time, but on the other hand, like it's weird because it feels like it I mean, I don't want to say it feels completely different from the pilot, but it's almost like they made the pilot and then they were like, oh, we forgot to put in this, and this, because all of a sudden they're like, the world feels smaller because a lot of these characters have these backstories that they're connected that we didn't know before. And it's almost like they're like, oh yeah. Well, of course, Milady and what's her face knew each other.
Malady.
And of course, I'm sorry, Malady. And of course, what's her face,
Yeah, no, I have to admit, like, I have to have the list of characters up because I know them all, but the names, I don't keep track of all of them. You're
Well,
talking about Miss True,
yes.
and
Well,
Melody.
it's the wonderful, mating dance of a new television show. We don't have the luxury of like a Cobra Kai where we've already watched the seasons and now we're going back and discussing it. So like you said, we're watching this live, so there's so many characters and I know who they are. It's just knowing their names offhand is a little tough.
But yeah, as you were saying, we find out that they have like intertwining backstories and stuff. I think that's kind of inevitable, given like we flashed back to 3 years ago, like what happened when they all got the powers, and they're gonna be like connected or have interacted, and we're gonna uncover that as we go. I totally feel you on like this feels like a whole season because episode 2, well. In summary, as you know, if you've watched this, episode 1 ends with like, oh, we gotta find Mary Brighton, and then like you expect that to be not the whole season, but like at least a couple of episodes. She's found by the end of episode 2, so I was really happy about that. I think maybe watching them not back to back helped in that regard, because it sort of paced it out a little bit more. It didn't feel like things were just zooming along at breakneck speed. But at the same, so episode 1 and episode 2, I had the same high level of hype. I still have hype, obviously, but I was just episode 3 for me that felt a bit more. The pace was a bit off for me, and it's off kind of because. I don't know. You're right. It's moving fast, but then in episode 3, I felt like it was moving slow at the same time, also somehow. So,
yeah, I could maybe see that. It's just because it's like it's not even just that. It's like yes, Amalia and Melody have a backstory, and also Mary and Mundy have a backstory, and then there's
Swan and Undy and that whole thing.
And then even just not backstory, then we have, Mrs. Bidlow, Lavinia Bidlow has maybe a shadowy secret going on, and there's a glowing orb in a ceiling. Like, again, I kind of appreciate it because it's like there's some plot, dudes. We're going for it. But it was like I didn't have enough time to process some of these things. For them to hit as hard as they should have.
Yeah.
But then again, I mean, it is only 6 episodes, at least so far. So, they're not wasting time. I do want to make sure I let you know that I don't hate that idea. It's just, it was just trying to take everything all in when I'm still trying to figure out their actual names right offhand by face.
Yeah, and like to compare it to, say, Dollhouse, again, a show no one really remembers or cares about, but I really feel like Dollhouse season 1, which was also a Joss Whedon show, it was totally like episodic, slow, nothing can really change, and then season 2, like, I don't know if it was halfway through or whatever, they find out they don't get a season 3, so it's fucking plot. And this kind of feels like a balance between the two. It's not quite as like zooming through the plot as Dollhouse season 2, but it's also not standing as still as Dollhouse season 1. So I think it'll be like once we get to the end of these 6 episodes, we'll probably be able to tell better how the pace works. But it's interesting to check in about it now. Do you want to go through and we'll summarize some of the story of them? I think we should maybe try to do it a bit faster than usual since we're talking about 2 episodes, but we can still like hit the major things from the major storylines. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, in the second episode, it was a lot about how like we're facing the the effects of the opera climax of the pilot, because I mean, I
appreciated because this was like a thing where it does make sense that these touched have been brought to light in a greater way than before, because before then they were kind of like in the shadows, people know about them or whatever, but now it's a big fucking deal because One Touched did a mass murder, and so they're coming and looting the orphanage, trying to show off the less offensive Touched at this sort of gathering, this sort of charity event or what have you, and also like the ferryman, Mr. Swan, and his salacious dealings of trying to exploit the Touched.
I kind of can't stand the ferryman and Hugo Swan. I can't, like, it feels like a different show. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like whenever we're checking in with that, it feels like we're all of a sudden on some other show.
Is it because it's too sexy and HBO-y?
Maybe, and I was going to talk about that because it's so HBO, like not just the ferryman, but just like the sexiness, and it might just be because I mean, obviously we're seeing these are the same things we've seen in shows like True Blood, shows like Game of Thrones, obviously. So it's not. I don't really blame the creators or the writers of the Nevers. It's I do feel like it's probably like HBO executives are like, hey, this is HBO. Like, we need to remind people that we get to do stuff like this. And I don't have a problem with that, or maybe I am a prude, but I guess partially it's because it feels so like a Joss Whedon show that it's like in my mind, it doesn't jive well yet. That, when they're even when they're saying like fuck and and all of a sudden like, and of course Malady always has to have her legs open, and then always being like come hither. So it just doesn't jive well because it's a similar experience to going from Gilmore Girls and then watching Mrs. Maisel. They started swearing, and then even in like the pilot of Mrs. Maisel, when like she goes topless, like it makes sense. I know I'm kind of like talking about a different show now. Like it makes sense, but it's weirdly jarring because now it's like we're in a Amy Sherman Palladino show. But then I feel like they didn't keep pushing that like as the show went on. Whereas like the Nevers, it's almost getting like they're like, yeah, sex, right? Sex. Could you imagine people had powers? You'd want to have sex with them. So I don't want to shit on it too much because it feels realistic. It does feel like, especially, people in power, and they're playing off of ideas of how, you could other people, like you can, look at someone, look down on them, but then you also like sexualize that otherness. So I get where they're going. It's just, it hasn't quite meshed together with the tone of the show yet for me.
That's interesting because, I totally understand why you would feel that way, but I haven't really, like, it hasn't felt jarring to me in that way. Like, I find Hugo Swan, like, he's a dickhead, but he just has oodles of charisma on the screen to me, and most of his interactions are pretty interesting. And I like his, relationship with Augie, I guess, Bidlow, the crow geek. Who like ends up being an investor but doesn't know what he's doing. It does feel like, not gratuitous, but it is.
Well,
I get where you're coming from, but
I think it kind of is gratuitous because when we have like Amalia, however you say it, and Penance, and they're just having like fun banter of like, well, how do you do? And it's like, oh, look at my invention, haha, it's not quite ready yet. And then it cuts to Hugo Swan be like, yeah, and he's ramming a girl, and he's like, just let me see the purple. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on?
That's fair. So and that storyline, unless I'm mistaken, it doesn't really advance dramatically. It is one of the things that sort of is an effect of the Touched coming more into prevalence in society. So he's like, oh, they're a gold mine. I'm pretty sure sex already sells. I guess he's just kind of like, fuck it, like this is gonna be my niche, because he already has a sex club. It already seems to do fine business, but he's decided that people are gonna be thrilled by this, so I want a hand in this, as it were. And he recruits his bro, his friend, to sort of be the official owner, and we see some scenes with him like Hugo Swan talking to the fucking minister guy. We see some scenes obviously in episode 2 with Hugo Swan as well, but I feel like the storyline just hasn't quite gone anywhere, even though we were talking so much about stuff moving quickly. Like this one in particular is still sort of simmering, right? We don't really know if it'll be anything.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of it as well, because it feels, because I'm so on board when we're with like Amalia and Penance and the whole X-Men of everything going on. So I'm like, so with that, and then they're not involved yet. I know, like, obviously things are brewing and there's going to be like a collision or something, but it feels just different right now. And I mean, I guess we kind of glossed over, like, this opens up with, in a very X-Men style, with someone's powers, you know, coming to pass in public, and the immediate scorn that comes along with that, and how, you know, what the ladies, like, they're like even talking about the touched at first, and then of course she makes something float, and then she has to like run away, and even her friend turns on her. So, you know, there's that going on. I mean, cutting back a little bit as well to the party, like, I can't help but roll my eyes at, like, wear the ribbons, like, hey, wear the ribbons so we know who you are. But then also, I guess it makes sense. It feels on the nose, but it also feels real. So
yeah, I really like this, to be honest. Like, yeah, it is a bit on the nose with the ribbons, but it also adds up to me. I know I'm such a mark because I'm so on board with, I'm just going to call him Mr. Crow, even though he's Mr. Bidlow, and like Penance, like starting to have their flirtationship, and then that getting shut down by society, or his aunt being like, fuck you, obviously we let them in the house, we don't want dogs to be, you know, kicked in the street, but you wouldn't fuck a dog. And he's like, what, fuck a crow? That's not exactly the dialogue as it went in the show, but you get what I'm saying. Like, I'm such a mark because it's so obvious what they're doing, but I'm also like, this is great. Like, he's secretly got powers and he's flying around in crows or whatever, and they're getting closer, and then he's like, no, I have to shut this down, and then they're gonna get closer again later. So yeah, I'm just like, oh, what a mark.
Also, I mean, never mind that she's touched, she's also Irish. Ooh.
Gross. Yeah, the actor is actually Irish. You know, I live in Ireland. I watch this with my girlfriend who's Irish. We continuously rate everyone's Irish accents throughout any show that we watch, basically.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I was going to say, because that's actually one of the lines of the dialogue, though. I think she actually does say that.
Oh, yeah. It's great. Never mind just being touched. She's also Irish. Great stuff. Doyle and Angel, actually, which we're also watching. Pretty good Irish accent on him. Actually, an Irish person.
I didn't know that. Oh, it's good to know. It ties together. It's a Whedon show.
Exactly. But yeah, so I was very on board with that. The bit you mentioned about the lady who I don't think she discovers her floaty power, but she uses it in public and is like chased down, finds a poster. The thing I was saying about like predictable tropey stuff, like just because it takes her so long to get to the orphanage, you kind of know that she's not going to get to the orphanage, right? Because like you would just have her show up at the orphanage, like the larger lady who shows up and makes people talk with her powers. But no, she has to have like 3 scenes or something where she's trying to find this safe haven. She's being harassed and eventually is like captured by this group that we've seen glimpses of before. They're lobotomizing her brain, and then, you know, later on in the episode we get a glimpse of her wandering around this huge orb thing that we don't know anything about at the moment.
Well, yeah, it's just weird. I mean, kind of staying on that for a second, because all I'm thinking is like, because they're like wandering around, but they're also, it's like they're working, it's like they're digging or something. And I think it's like
classic Joss Whedon. It's like the demon place in Anne. No, is that the name of the episode? When she's in LA. Yeah.
Yep.
Like they're just enslaved, lobotomized people, basically. I don't know. I don't think they'd be the most efficient workers, but I guess for secrecy. But anyway, go on. What were you going to say?
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. You have these people with special powers, although I guess it's proven they're not always going to be like great special powers, but it seems like you'd be getting work done much quicker if you somehow were using these powers instead of just these weak women trying to get buckets of rocks, like bring buckets of rocks back and forth. Come on.
Yeah, but if I understand correctly what's going on, this sort of specific avenue does not like the idea of these powers and is, I guess, lobotomizing them to cut off that power. But it's hard to know. I was, even though it probably is predictable looking back, I thought it was a great reveal that it's Mrs. Bidlow who's the bad guy here. I don't know what you thought.
Yeah, I actually wasn't saying it was a bad reveal or predictable or anything like that. I was just kind of like, I'm just getting whiplash of being like this thing and then this thing,
Yeah.
So it felt like a lot. But I mean, who knows? Like, yeah, the lobotomies are bad, but there could be a greater good that she's working for. You don't know.
Yeah, I think watching them in sequence is actually part of that, because when I look at the plot of these two episodes, I'm like, that is a lot of plot to go through in like 2 hours. Whereas I did have like a week, and I was so excited after episode 2. I was like thinking about what might happen and everything, and so there was definitely more of a padding between them, you know. So I don't have the whiplash effect as much, but I do see where you're coming from there.
Yeah.
The other big sort of storyline in this episode is obviously Mary, who has been captured by Melody. They have some dialogue. Melody is being weird. On the other side of that, we have Miss True, like running around with this detective Mundy, and they're sort of trying to find Mary because he has a relationship, or had a relationship with her, and obviously we know why the orphanage crew wants to find her. So they have some of that, some character development and what have you, some running around, and then eventually we get a confrontation with Melody and Amalia True, and we find out, as you said, that they were connected before. And having just watched it, how would you summarize that? It was they were friends. They were both like committed for being crazy, like in an asylum or whatever, I think. And True got out. Didn't take
I mean, they
Melody with her, obviously.
Yeah, obviously we don't know some of the details really. I mean, they keep it very vague. I mean, because I think it's not even like, it's obviously inferred in this episode, but then she outright says that she was in an asylum in episode 3. When she's speaking to the doctor. But then it's also when she's speaking to the doctor in the next episode, it's inferred that he's aware of what she's talking about, because he's like, you know, some would say you didn't have another choice or something. So yeah, we're very vague on what's going on, but it's just weird because I get it on one hand. I mean, because she has to keep saying like, I've actually almost forgotten her, which I feel bad about. And it's like, so you didn't recognize her, you know, when you're fighting in the last episode? Like, I'm probably nitpicking with that, but I'm just kind of, it's, I guess it's shown that, you know, Melody has known who she is basically the whole time, kind of, or at the very least, she recognized her in the previous episode. But Amalia is only just now like putting these together, like, oh, wait a minute, we knew each other. And I guess we're going to have to wait to see how that plays out. It's just, it feels like, and I could be wrong. Obviously, I'm not a showrunner. I'm not Joss Whedon. I'm not a pedigree of a Joss Whedon or even a Jane Espenson. But I just feel like, why wouldn't this have happened in the pilot? You know, is there...
Because, well, the pilot was already quite busy. I was just totally taken in by episode 2, and I could see why it would be a bit weird. And I think it is because, as you said, they're talking about, or Melody's like inferring that they were good friends. So you'd think she'd recognize her. I think that might make more sense as we get it flashed back. But Melody's very upset because she feels betrayed by how things played out, and she does basically the Joker thing, because it's because first when she arrives here, Amalia, there's like almost a video game thing, because she's walking and then like fires blaze up from Bonfire Annie, basically telling her which way to go, and there's like a banner saying welcome, and that just feels so video gamey, and that it's like shutting off paths and showing you where to go for the big confrontation. And then it gets really comic booky because she's there, and it's literally the thing that the Joker does in having her like having Batman pick between being Batman and Bruce Wayne, and has them hanging up there, and she has to pick one. And as always happens in that sort of story as well, like she like, oh, there's always a third path, and shoots herself. So
or like very Green Goblin, you must choose, Parker.
Sorry,
who you want.
More Green
No, you're
Goblin.
right. The Joker is probably a better comparison, but well, and the other question, and this is kind of like a little sidetrack here, but I can't tell, and I think maybe we mentioned this when we were discussing the pilot. Is the actress that plays Melody very good or very bad?
It's right there, like it's on a knife's edge. I'm not sure. Honestly,
there's some instances where it's like she's rocking it. This is great, and then there's other instances like, wait a minute, is she great? I'm not sure.
It's Helena Bonham Carter. Like, she's doing Helena Bonham Carter in the same way that Helena Bonham Carter can be really good and also can be way too much.
Yeah.
So it's kind of balancing there. And it's also like when you're acting like that, it feels like you're like the tone of the show is kind of either supporting you or fucking you, because the show has to have your back when you're so out there and acting so crazy all the time. And that's maybe the thing, that the tone of the show is kind of still finding itself, shifting a little bit this way and that. And it feels in some scenes, like in this scene, the confrontation here where she has to choose and everything, I was totally on board with Malady. And then there are other scenes with Malady where I'm just like, I'm not as on board.
Yeah, the only time though where the show doesn't have her back, in my opinion, is this whole contraption does not make sense. Because it's like she shoots one, but they're like, they both have nooses on and there's a pulley in the middle. I feel like if you shot one, they'll fall and then hang the other one. Or maybe that's the trick.
The pulley was a bit tricky. Yeah, that made it a bit more confusing, for sure. But the idea being, I guess they'd hold on to them and not let that person fall. Yeah, no, it was pretty weird of a setup. And it was pretty clear that she was never going to do one of the two things. And then Bonfire Annie kind of turns on her as well. And it's just like, this is fucking I mean. Ridiculous.
That was the other thing. Like, again, kind of going back to then we have this reveal that they knew each other. Then Bonfire Annie, for some reason, I'm like, oh, did Amalia know this whole time that was going to happen? Then we have the reveal of the lobotomized and Mrs. Bidlow. I was just kind of like, all right, this thing happened. And I mean, it's good television because these are things you're wondering about for the next episode. And again, maybe I've just been trained by some of these bad shows that stretch all this shit out so much that I'm not used to. It's like, oh no, things are happening. We're moving, like get on board or, you'll be left in the dust.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think there's a bit of a question there of if is it too fast, or are we just like not expecting it to be this fast with the pacing? But well, I guess let's get into episode 3 because that's kind of it for episode 2. And here I felt like the pacing was a bigger problem for me personally. We'll get into some of the details, but the episode anyway starts with them trying to recruit Bonfire Annie because she basically helped them out and she's like abandoned Malady. So they're trying to recruit her. It's kind of like almost going well, and they were just hanging out, having discussions, and then Penance gets high on opium because they burnt like an opium cart, and then like Bonfire Annie gets away, and Amalia's like, let me get some of that, let me get a puff of that as well, and they just intentionally get high. And I'm like, okay, this is weird but interesting, I guess. Yeah, so that's the start of it. And that doesn't really, I don't know, it kind of sets things in motion, but not as much as in other episodes. We have sort of this follow-up with the Beggar King is upset because obviously Bonfire Annie was trying to take over his area. We see Nick Frost trying to be intimidating, cutting off someone's mark. And we get a lot of like smaller scenes in this episode is what I feel like. It's like, it's slow, but also, yeah, I don't know. The pace is kind of, it's predictable this episode, I feel, and I kind of feel like I know what's going to happen throughout, and it's a bit slow, so that's probably why it didn't work as well for me.
Yeah, it didn't really come off to me that way. I mean, but again, it was more, I guess, things that I was describing from the second episode where it is like a show. I guess it's just things that season 1 shows do, because especially, from who knows when the pilot was shot to when they finally actually started really breaking these episodes and then going back to film them. Because even going to the beginning, this back and forth that Amalia has with the doctor, it didn't feel the same as the way they were in the pilot when it was these like small moments just hinting at a relationship. Now it's kind of like, yeah, we fucked and we could fuck again. And then he's like, but I have a wife and this bullshit. I would never do that. And she's like, yeah, but whatever. You're still here. Like, obviously it's not exactly what they were doing, but because like even Amalia, like, I don't know if it's all in this episode, because then even later on, she's like, yeah, I fuck dudes. I don't know their name. Doesn't even matter. I beat the fuck out of people. like don't get me wrong. I'm not against that, because like I did mention, I think in the pilot, like clearly they're going for this tortured hero, which every good hero has to be a tortured hero. But it was interesting kind of seeing it quickly change a bit, or at least maybe they're just spelling it out more than they were previously. And then I guess while they're having that happen, one of the girls is like listening. I mean, they kind of go out of their way to show that she's like hearing him. She's like, but it doesn't matter because Amalia is yelling like, "I'm sorry, I can't be generous about being your mistake." But I don't know. I didn't love that scene, but it just felt different to me than what I thought was going on here.
Yeah, I think that scene, and like I kind of feel like I'm contradicting myself because I'm saying that like the pace is slow, and then we were just talking about like the breakneck speed of the show and all of that. But it's kind of like a scene like that, and I think probably mainly like Mundy's storyline in this, where I have no idea why it's drawn out the way it is, where we have one scene at first where he arrives at a police station and has a mysterious note to meet in a certain place. And then like a while later, he like arrives in a different scene. He arrives to that place, gets a pint, and then they're cut away again, and then cut back eventually. And he like has had several drinks and gets a note. And the note just says like, "This is what it feels like when you waste my time." Basically the equivalent of a snarky text message. And he just kind of looks at this guy, and maybe I'm missing something here because like I don't understand gay culture, but he gets up and follows this guy, and Swan is there, and then they have a conversation. But that's like 3 scenes to get there, and I don't mind their conversation. I don't mind the reveal that they were in like a relationship or semi-relationship before, and Mundy can't accept that he's probably gay and all of this stuff. But I just did not understand why we wouldn't start with that, like go directly to that scene, because we've seen them interact before. It's not a big reveal that they know each other and have some sort of connection. So I don't get what's going on with this drawn out bit, because it's not like those other scenes add anything, you know?
Yeah, and I don't mind the reveal either, but it just feels a little forced. Like, I guess it makes sense in this, like they're going for late 1800s, so obviously, you know, they're covering different taboos, although it's tough to really gauge it when, you know, again, we keep checking in on these like on this ferryman place where it's everyone's, I guess people like to keep their lustily secrets secret and underground, so it does tie in with that. But I don't know, it's like we've seen this storyline before, so I just feel like it's fine if they do it, but I hope there's going to be a little bit more to it, or like an interesting point to it, rather than just being like, it's just weird because we go from episode 2 and we get this backstory dropped on us that Mundy and Mary were about to be married. She left him at the altar, and then immediately we're like, oh yeah, this is why she left him at the altar, because he's gay. But then it's also pitched as it wasn't done in a like for a nefarious purpose. It was almost done in a way like the way Swan hints at. It was done in this way to kind of help him in a lot of ways, make him be the victim of being left at the altar, so it keeps the pressure off him. So I don't know. I don't want to like poo-poo it, but I'm also just not celebrating it, because I feel like you want to earn it more, and there should be something at play here the way it goes, but we'll see.
Yeah. And the whole point of like that whole sequence, obviously the point is really for us to sort of get this reveal, get them interacting, and sort of understand a bit more of what's going on with Mundy, the character I care the least about in the show, and Swan, who I think is interesting, and I like almost any scene that he's in, but I don't really buy. They kind of hint at a little bit that for some reason, even though he fucks everything that moves, for some reason he like cares about Mundy or is like upset about this. That is what I kind of don't buy here, because Mundy is just a psychopath in any scene he's in a way that mostly works, but like generally speaking, like, I don't see the huge attraction here. And the point of it is also kind of for Swan to go like, hey, I have this leverage on you. I want you to get Mary to tell you what's going on in the orphanage because I care about the touched and I want to exploit them for money, give them a safe haven where they can be hookers. And like, that's all fine, but again, Mary's dead at the end of this episode, so this doesn't really set anything up. And also, we saw Mary kind of digging and trying to find out more before this scene. So she's already doing that, but isn't telling Mundy really details of what's going on. So, like, in the grander plot of things, it doesn't really have a purpose, which is why, again, I don't think I would have reacted to this scene if we just started with this scene, like him showing up at the ferryman and this conversation happens. But because with all the cloak and dagger stuff, I'm like, why so much cloak and dagger when he literally runs like a sex club? You know, he is openly running a sex club. So I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something.
Well, I mean, yeah, because it feels like they're trying to reference something where because the note ends up saying like this is what it's like, feels like to have your time wasted. So, but I don't know what Swan's referencing, and maybe it's because I'm wasn't paying attention or something, because it feels like he's doing it as some sort of revenge, but whatever. And I mean,
then he's sitting in the back like, why? But he does want to talk to him, so I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, going with Mary, like there's multiple times where characters are questioning Amalia's purpose, and I feel like they're trying to tell us, the audience, like, well, what is her secret? Like, yeah, is she really just helping these people to help them, or does she also feel like a war is coming, like Lavinia Bidlow believes? Like, is there some other purpose for what she's doing? Plus, I mean, we know that she has done something potentially to put Malady in like her stance where she's at. So I don't know. Like they keep like hinting at things, and I guess you're right. Maybe that kind of ties into what you're talking about, where it feels like the pacing's off, because it's not like they hint at these things and there's much payoff to it. It just kind of like, it's just more what's to come in further episodes. And then I forgot about like the old men that are also a villain. Like they're still kind of like moseying about, saying like, haha, women think they know stuff, we'll show them we're men, which I guess I appreciate, because we don't need them to always be the big bad. But it's almost like I forgot they're around. And I guess, are they... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that's Lord Massen, the main guy out of the old men. And we do see him in this episode for a bit. The main thing being he's getting a telephone installed. And one of the men goes downstairs and sort of hears weird noises from the cellar. And some, the housekeeper shows up and goes like, don't go near the dogs, they're rabid. Am I wrong, or is there like no payoff to this yet? We just kind of are left to wonder what's going on in there behind that door.
Yeah, I feel like, well, at least where I'm left to wonder, did his daughter not die?
Yeah. Her daughter being in there was my first thought, and being affected by some, big turn that makes her a werewolf or something, because when they go down there, you start to think like that he's involved in obviously exploiting the touched, etc. But I do like that's kind of, because we have revealed that Mrs. Bidlow is the one who's actually, or Miss Bidlow, I don't remember, is the one who's running that side of the operation. They do say that they're like old friends or something at the opera, I think, but it does seem like a separate thing. And yeah, because there's like, I'm pretty sure they like pan over to his daughter's grave and like her year of death. And then we see the thing in the basement. So it seems to pretty clearly be indicating that, yeah, it's his daughter down there.
Yeah. So then I almost got confused. Sorry, let me cut you off, because I almost got confused, because then when we cut to the guy, like the bullet hand guy, I was almost like, wait, are we back in that basement? But no, we were just at a jail cell where he got let out of jail.
Yeah. I was a bit confused by that as well, because obviously he attacks at the end there, and it's all supposed to be very full of intrigue and like, who is he? working for because he was released by the police, who was held by the police, but who exerted the influence to have him released. Is that answered? I don't forget. There's so much intrigue that I almost start forgetting stuff. But one can assume that might be sort of Bidlow and her whole operation. Because obviously the main plot of this episode, which we haven't really talked about, is the whole them... So Mary's lost her voice. They want to have her sing into a megaphone so all of London can hear and feel this thing and gather together. But she's sort of lost her singing, and it only happens when she feels certain emotions. And then they find out about this fake orphanage place where they're luring people, as we saw in the previous episode. They go there, kick some ass. I do love this bit. It's pretty cool. Some guy who looks like Darth Malak from the Old Republic games is there. That's pretty cool. They capture this old lady, interrogate her. Again, she gives a really creepy speech about killing her daughter, right? Or son or something.
Yes, her daughter. And it gets almost like to parody levels of dark, where it's like, you know, clearly when she starts talking, at least in my mind, it's like, okay, we're going to get to how she killed her daughter, and it does. And then she's even has to be like, and of course, the baby within her. I do like the way it ties in, though, with the Lucy, because I like again, it's grimdark, but the way she found her powers is when she picked up her 6-month baby and he exploded, all his bones broke or something like that. It's almost parody, but it works.
Yeah, I thought I kind of liked it. I like that we have this character whose name I forget, the one who is the prostitute, Desiree Blodgett. She's the one who gets everyone to pour out their secrets, and that's like an interesting thing because you kind of challenge an actor to bring that, but you have an excuse in world for why they would be going on a long fucking monologue that would happen in a worse show. You know, they would be doing that on their own, but she's kind of there and is making creating a zone of you're in a worse show and we'll go on a long tirade about this, but it makes sense and it's not a bad show. So yeah, and that ties in, as you were saying. And then Mary, basically, because of this, seeing all this darkness, is like, oh, I can sing now, because it's basically about her feeling fucked, feeling really bad, I think, from what I understood previously, and she feels really bad, feels like she can set this right. So, then we get to the big fucking set piece that we have to talk about, because it's fucking awesome. But yeah, Amalia True goes to see Miss Bidlow and gives her the evidence, and then is attacked, and we have the big water fight scene.
Well, real quick with Mary's choice, so I guess the way they're spelling it out is it's not so much that Mary now trusts Amalia, it's just that she sees the group, she's more inspired by the group of girls, the way they come together, right? And at least that's what I'm trying to read from it, because I don't see a moment where because earlier she's trying to grill Amalia on what her thing is, and I don't feel like she ever gets an answer. So is it a takeaway just more so she's inspired by the rest of the touch that are there?
No, the weird thing is that scene where she's grilling Amalia feels like it hooks into the storyline where Mundy is trying to get information for Swan, except it doesn't actually hook into that storyline at all, and is kind of independent of what's going on with Mary. And is because with Mary, her thing is that she's not able to sing. We've understood that it's kind of connected with when she feels a total despair or whatever, the song can come out of her. And I think that's what seeing the reality of the horrors of what some of the other touched have endured, and this horrible story of the murder and the bit about Lucy shattering her newborn and everything, seeing all of this actual pain gives her that purpose. And I saw her as being pretty well integrated from the start of the episode. She's there playing and singing music, regular music from an earlier scene and so on. So I think she was, on board with what they were doing and just kind of questioning Amalia a little bit, because the show wants us to wonder what she's up to.
But yeah, anyways, so then we pick back up, and she gets first dumped out of her carriage off the bridge into the water. And yeah, I did tweet about this earlier. It's one of the coolest fucking action / fight scenes I've seen in a long time. It's so inventive and fun and well done. Like, I thought it was fucking awesome.
Yeah, it is. I agree.
They did like a breakdown a bit on it. I don't know if you saw like the bonus things
did,
that they put at the end of the HBO shows where they're kind of getting into how they did it. Because I mean, if you haven't seen, I don't know why you're listening to this discussion, but you know, the guy's walking on water and she's stuck swimming underwater. And I think they'd even describe it in like the visual effects like breakdown of it's almost like whack-a-mole, where obviously she has to come up for air and then he's just there to like punch her down. The only real cheat they have at one point is it makes no sense. At one point he grabs her by the neck and pulls her out of the water. And it's like, why the fuck would he do that except for giving her more of a chance? That would be my only critique. But it was so cool and it looked awesome. And then it culminates with when she wraps the chain around his neck and she falls back into the water and he's stuck on the surface and she chokes him out. It was great. And again, I think I was kind of with you I was watching this episode, but I was kind of like, yeah, whatever. I wasn't like super into it or anything like that. But then when this happened, it like brought me fully back on board with the show. And I was like, oh, this is fucking cool. And this is like some of the potential of cool ass shit they could do, you know?
For sure, because this is in episode 3 out of what will hopefully be a show with multiple seasons, and it's so impressive visually, but more than that, just creatively. Of this is a world where this sort of fight can happen, and all the stages of the fight and the blocking and everything that goes through it is really smart, and like the different things where he takes the chain off when he does that and all the different steps, and like just the idea of this guy who's like the actor's like huge, and just the idea of someone who is unable to go into water, and so he carries around a huge chain to sort of fuck with people underwater, and they call him the fisherman. Like he could be a villain in any comic series, and I swear they'll probably make like a comic out of this. Why wouldn't they? It just gels so well. But like, yeah, he could be like that, and yet he's like killed here in episode 3 or whatever. You know, he's not the big bad guy of the season. This is just an awesome set piece that's here propping up episode 3, I would argue. I guess the remaining question on this is kind of what's up with this dude? Who sent this dude though? Because obviously he hangs out with the Beggar King, and I think there's a line in episode 1 where the Beggar King stops the carriage, and he makes some joke about, oh, you can't get this guy into a bath, but it's a joke about him smelling. But then obviously a few episodes later we're like, oh, you literally couldn't get him into a bath. But I am kind of so is it the Beggar King? Because I don't think it makes sense that the Beggar King sent him. I think it would have to be the sort of Bidlow organization, or what do you think?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, it could almost work if it like I think you're right. I don't think it is the Beggar King. If it somehow like in the show they're like, no, it's the Beggar King, it would almost work because they would tie it into how her and Penance were there at the beginning when the opium got burnt up, even though they technically didn't do it. But is he just blaming all of the touched? But I don't think they're going to go that route anyways. I think this is going to be tied into whatever the greater mystery is on who killed Mary. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, because I feel like it could have been the Beggar King, but I just feel like the earlier scene with the Beggar King would have had him say to the guy, go and fuck up them and show them that they can't fuck with my business. And then I would have been like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. But now I'm like, he is upset at Bonfire Annie and wants her dead. And at this point, they haven't even joined forces. So if this fight was next episode, when Bonfire Annie has gone to live at the orphanage and hang out with them, as she does at the end of this episode, then I'd be like, yeah, it makes perfect sense. Of course, the Beggar King is like, you're all fucking with me. I am sick of this. And I never got my automated motor car. So fuck you. And sends the guy. But I just don't see this being the reason, and this happens immediately after she goes to Bidlow and is like, here's all the shit I found in the place that you run, and I need you to fix this. So it's just very conspicuous, and seems like that would be that'd probably be it, but hey, we're gonna have to wait and see. So after the
before we get past the one other thing, I'm sure someone, they make a joke about it, so they're in on it, but I'm sure someone out there is complaining that she took her dress off under the water. I just want to say settle down.
Because that happened earlier. Like they do make a joke about it already.
Yeah.
About her riding up in her under things. And Penance, right, is like, you're allergic to clothes or something like that.
Yeah, do you hate dresses?
Yeah.
And going back and coming up to this scene here too, like I think you'd mentioned it on a different when we were talking about the woman in episode 2 trying to find the orphanage. If you know the tropes, this is clearly so early for this to happen, for Mary to find her song, and they go to the park and the amplifier works and she's going to sing. You know, this is not going to end well, right? Like that's clearly where we're going.
Oh yeah. Like I watch a lot of TV and I've watched a lot of Joss Whedon shows and I'm like, she's probably gonna die. And my girlfriend who I watch this with, who hasn't watched she's not as much of a fucking head case about me about watching every TV thing, but she's still pretty savvy about this sort of thing. But she just looked at Mary in that last scene and was like, yeah, that looks like a great dress to get shot in, because it's like pure white and like blood is going to show up really well on it. And also I'm pretty sure Mary has some scene with Mundy in this, right, where they talk and sort of reconcile his being different and like her saying that she's always going to love him or whatever, and you're like, it's a Joss Whedon show, so one of them is going to die, like.
Yeah.
But yeah, and with that in mind, I do feel like it's a bit hurried getting to this point where I thought the season was going to be about finding her, right, and then we found her and then she's dead, and I'm just like, this is almost too fast for me to care.
And this is based on nothing, and obviously it's not what they did, and it wouldn't have made sense anyways. But in my mind, I'm half expecting for when she falls over that Mundy's the one that shot her. Like, like it is something like a bad TV show would do, because again, like you mentioned, it's so telegraphed when they have that like scene together where they're very understanding and loving that you'd like throw something in the mix. But you know, that's not where they went. It's a handgun guy. But yeah, again, it's in a Netflix show, and I don't mean to pick on Netflix. It's a lot of shows these days. This would be like episode 8 or 10 in a 10 episode series. This would be the finale. Yeah. We'd spend this season looking for her, then finally getting her. But once we get her, then it'd be a couple episodes of like, sing already. Why can't you sing your song? And then it'd be like, we need to gather the girls, and it would end in the finale where she sings, and then where the episode ends with all the women showing up at the orphanage, and it's like smash cut to black. Let's go to season 2. I'm glad they're not doing it. It's just that's usually, in my opinion, where a lot of shows would do these days.
Yeah, and it could maybe be like mid-season, right? But we're not even mid-season. Like there's they said that episode 6 is a good breaking point, like thematically or dramatically, for where the show has gotten to in that point. And I'm just like, Jesus, it's by episode 6, it's going to feel like season 3 of this show, because there's so much happening. Like this is what I would have expected in episode 6, really. Because as you said, they finally like gather pretty much all the touched in London heard the song. There's men and children showing up at the orphanage, and of course Bonfire Annie lighting it up very cinematically, and it's cool. But yeah, it's a lot of movement, which not a bad thing, but it's kind of hard to care as much as if we actually had the time to get to know these characters through some more smaller conflicts or dramas. But at the same time, I always complain when things are drawn out, so it's a really weird balance to strike, because a lot of Joss Whedon shows are obviously like episodic and like procedural in a way, that there's a monster of the week and then they have that as a thing to complete within that episode, and then also advance the plot and the characters a little bit more, and you get to know them a little bit more every episode. And here it's like, fuck that. Which is, you know, has its positives and its negatives. But yeah, I didn't really care about Mary getting shot, to be honest. So yeah. It
didn't have that same impact. Like it just had the impact of like, ooh, okay, now like we'll have to see where this goes. I have expected Mundy to be revealed to also be touched. They did not go that route though. But I was expecting it just with the way, because it's like they specifically mentioned, you know, that he wasn't there, and then they had another scene where like they mentioned like only, you know, when we're in the room, only the touched in the room could hear her song. Like it just felt like something they were maybe going for, but of course they didn't.
Yeah. So that brings us to the end. I also
Oh.
have been. Oh, go on.
Sorry, one other thing. Because I was praising the effects and the action and stuff of the fight on water. I have to call out the CGI blood and bullets when Mary gets shot was very bad. Please do better. Number one, I hate CGI blood. Let's get some real squibs out there. Squibs look great. Love when there's blood and gore. But this was like almost over the top the way her CGI blood and bullet holes were getting ripped through. I know it's not important to a lot of people. It's very important to me. You can call it out.
Yeah, it felt like the first gunshot you were supposed to be like, oh no, it's fine, she can be healed by the doctor, and then like just to show that that's not the case, she just gets ripped apart by these bullets. And of course Mundy shoots the guy. So we'll see where this all goes. I have been remiss as well in speaking of my girlfriend. She came up with the Never Afters as a name, and then I pitched it to Jim, and that's what we're calling this little podcast, discussing the Nevers. Because I was like, the Never Have I Evers or whatever, and I thought about it for a long time, and I said that suggestion to her, and she was like, how about the Never Afters? And I was like, that's way better, and you thought of it immediately. So yeah, that's what we're doing. You can find our coverage of the Nevers at showswhatyouknow.com, but we also discuss like a million other TV shows there. So please check it out if you're looking for any more television podcasts at showswhatyouknow.com. If you have insights into any of the things we complained about or praised, or you just want to share what you think about the Nevers so far, email us at showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com, and we'll include your opinions in our upcoming discussions. But yeah, I think we'll probably block it out maybe with another couple of episodes for the next one, or see if we go episode to episode, maybe just the finale separately. We'll see, mid-season finale, because again, there's only 6 episodes that will be released right now, so we're halfway through that half of the season. And I guess that's pretty much it. Is there anything else we should say, Jim?
No, I think that about covers it. And the show hasn't been long enough where we have an outro yet. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.